The designated hour having arrived, I call to order this regular meeting of Ancel Glink's Quorum Forum podcast, the podcast local governments need to do business. In the chair today, it's me, Tyler Smith. On the agenda for this meeting of the Quorum Forum podcast, we have new laws heading our way. With the 2026 spring session of the Illinois General Assembly having adjourned on May 31st, the Quorum Forum podcast is here to give you an update on all the newest laws affecting Illinois municipalities and other units of local government. But first, let's take the roll. We have a partner at Ancel Glink, and he advises municipal clients on a wide variety of zoning and land use issues, including annexation, tax increment financing, renewable energy, complex land deals, and most importantly for today, he is a former chair of the APA Illinois Legislative Committee. Greg Jones is here.
Hi, Tyler.
Before we talk about all the new laws affecting local governments in Illinois, we have to note that summer has officially started in the Midwest, so baseball season is here and getting into high swing. And for the first time in years, and perhaps forever, both Chicago baseball teams, as well as every team in the NL Central, have a winning record at the start of June. Greg, with baseball fever sweeping through Chicago and the Midwest, who is your all-time favorite baseball player and your most favorite underrated player that deserves some fan appreciation from our Quorum Forum listeners?
Oh man, that's a great question, and baseball definitely is in full swing. I think I'll take the second one first. On the underrated player, I'm from Michigan, so I'm a transplant of sorts with all sorts of terrible sports loyalties that I've brought along with me. So I would have to say most underrated player that deserves more attention and probably some Hall of Fame attention is Lou Whitaker, who was a second baseman for the Detroit Tigers back in the 80s and 90s, who has very similar numbers to Ryan Sandberg, but has not gotten nearly the same attention as Sandberg has. And then I think on favorite player of all time, that's tough. That's tough. And this probably won't be a very popular response, but as a kid, I don't know that there was anyone more exciting to watch than Barry Bonds. This was before, he decided to take a lot of substances that increased his hat size 5 or 6 times over. But what a great ball player.
We hate to see Detroit Lions legends not getting the attention they deserve because of the big market Chicago Cubs taking up all of that attention for a good second baseman. And Barry Bonds was unbelievable to watch even after the PED allegations.
Yes,
he was great. And I'd say for me, the most underrated favorite player has to be Ryan Theriot and Mark DeRosa for the Cubs, those early 2000s Cubs teams. They were so fun to watch. And all-time favorite, a recency bias is very real for me, so I'd have to go with Rizzo from the 2016 Cubs championship team for sure.
That was a special year, no doubt.
Well, it's shaping up to be an exciting summer for baseball fans in Chicago. And as usual, our trusty engineer Rick is present. We have a quorum. Dear listeners, the Illinois General Assembly's spring session recently concluded with many new bills affecting local governments being sent to the governor's desk. It was a very busy legislative session, and some of the bills that did not pass drew the most attention. Governor Pritzker's Build Plan legislative package has been closely followed and frequently discussed by municipalities since its introduction in February. Greg, what was the final status of this legislative package in the spring 2026 legislative session?
Yeah, this is kind of the big one. Lots of municipal chatter about preemption and issues surrounding the build package. But after Governor Pritzker announced this build package, which is a slate of several different types of laws intended to claw back local zoning authority that has long been held by municipalities and reset it with the state. The build plan did not pass. It was introduced initially as an initiative to lower the cost of living for Illinois residents by making it more efficient and cost effective to build housing throughout the state. It was introduced as an omnibus bill in the House and as individual bills in the Senate. And it covered a number of different topics, but broadly speaking, plan legislation or the build plan legislation, excuse me, presented a significant and historic preemption of local land use and zoning authority that addressed issues including statewide zoning standards, minimum lot sizes, residential density allowances. The law would have dramatically increased the residential density allowed throughout communities across the state. Legalization of accessory dwelling units. These are granny flats or ADUs, as you've probably typically heard them referred to. Imposing limitations on a municipality's ability to enforce minimum parking requirements. The law also would have authorized third-party plan reviewers and building inspectors in some cases, and created a statewide formula for impact fees. So there's parity between the fees that communities charge that are intended to account for the impact that a development has on essential services. The bill plan did not receive a warm reception. It was strongly opposed by advocates of local land use control through the end of the legislative session, and ultimately it did not advance beyond committee. But with that said, it's likely to come back in some form or another. It's unclear whether or not the entire slate of proposals would be represented or reintroduced, excuse me, during the veto session or a later session. But it's likely, now that the conversation has started, that Illinois has not heard the last of this. And it's certainly gotten quite a bit of attention in municipal circles, including with the Illinois Municipal League, who proposed its own plan in response to the build plan. They have their own acronym. Pritzker had build, IML has real, which stands for Reducing Expenses and Advancing Local Housing Act, the REAL Act. It was proposed this spring as well, and it set forth a number of suggestions on housing policy issues, seeking to deliver property tax relief, encourage community input, and provide local officials with tools to implement housing solutions to address affordability issues. The REAL Act presented an alternative approach to the Build Act, but it also didn't move in the General Assembly either. Like I said earlier, housing policy and affordability seem to be issues that are here to stay, though. And with the governor focusing on it and the IML focusing on it, it's safe to assume that we likely have not heard the last of these issues, and more will likely follow. One thing that comes to mind is the People Over Parking Act, which was passed last year, I believe, during the veto session after being introduced during the regular session. It ended up getting folded into the Transit Consolidation Act, which addressed the RTA, CTA, and PACE last year. It's not unreasonable to potentially see something like that happening either in veto session or portions of the Build Act being tacked on to some larger bill in a way that maybe they would not get as much attention as the Build Act did this time around.
Nothing makes the end of a legislative session more exciting than dueling proposals on something that gets people paying as close of attention as housing policy and affordability. So thanks for the update on that recent housing legislation, Greg. Moving forward to bills that actually passed, is there any housing grants that were approved by the legislature?
Yeah, there were several. The fiscal year 27 budget passed at the very end of the legislative session, allocated funds to the following for housing grants. There's $100 million was appropriated from the Build Illinois Bond Fund to the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity for grants related to missing middle housing and infrastructure grant program. Another $100 million was appropriated from the Build Illinois Bond Fund to the Department of Human Services for IDA for missing middle affordable housing programs, including grants, loans, investments, and prior year's costs. There was $25 million that was appropriated from the Build Illinois Bond Fund to the Department of Human Services for IDA for the buy down payment assistance program. Another $25 million was appropriated from Build Illinois Bond Fund to the Department of Human Services for IDA for the Opening Doors Down Payment Assistance Program. This also helps people access the housing market. And there was $180 million that was appropriated from the Illinois Affordable Housing Trust Fund to the Department of Human Services for grants pursuant to the Affordable Housing Act. So there was a fair amount of activity on the funding side, at least, even if we didn't see anything happen with the build legislation.
That is some significant appropriations, so that is always good to see. Now, moving on from housing issues, there were many bills affecting Illinois local governments that were passed by the General Assembly at the session, and the first one that we'll be talking about today is Senate Bill 3484, which is legislation that seeks to adopt statewide standards for new and popular recreation devices such as e-bikes, e-scooters, and many other similar devices that are available on the consumer market. Senate Bill 3484 was passed by the General Assembly and also affects a municipality's ability to regulate these e-mobility devices. Effective January 1st, 2027, this legislation amends the Illinois Vehicle Code by adding a new definition for electric micromobility devices, which is meant to broadly include electric skateboards, electric unicycles, as well as low and high-speed e-scooters. This bill also updates the vehicle code's definition of electric personal assistive mobility devices to include hoverboard products, which are defined as self-balancing with two non-tandem wheels. Any device falling within the definition of an electric micromobility device does not need to obtain a certificate of title for the device or product from the Illinois Secretary of State, and a user or operator does not need to have a valid Illinois or other states' driver's license to operate such a vehicle. This bill also seeks to enact new use regulations for electric micromobility devices. For example, no person would be allowed to operate such a device on any sidewalk, highways with posted speed limits in excess of 35 miles per hour, unless there is a designated bike lane along such a highway, or any interstate highway. Additionally, use of these electric micromobility devices will be limited to streets and highways with speed limits lower than 35 miles per hour, designated bicycle lanes, or other bicycle paths. Furthermore, to operate an electric micromobility device, a person must be at least 16 years of age. And most crucially, this bill contains a home rule preemption provision that will prohibit any municipality from regulating electronic micromobility devices, making this area an issue of exclusive state regulation and control. This bill further amends definitions under the Illinois Vehicle Code by simplifying the definition of e-bikes to any bicycle with operable pedals and electronic motor, and it creates a new definition for high-speed electronic scooters, which we mentioned earlier under the electric micromobility devices, with broadly encompassing any scooter that can be powered by human power and an electric motor with a maximum speed that exceeds 15 miles per hour. And the final change that this bill makes that we'll talk about today is that this legislation would also require any person operating a Class 1 or Class 2 e-bike to be at least 15 years old, and further preempts home rule authority from regulating e-bikes contrary to the act. While this act has not yet been signed by the governor, it is possible it will be, and would greatly change the current state of municipal regulation for these devices. And moving forward, the next bill we'll be talking about today is Senate Bill 3222, which was passed by the General Assembly in the early morning hours of June 1st, and it changes how hemp products are regulated in Illinois. The changing state regulations under this act for hemp products is an issue that we've seen discussed in previous legislative sessions, so it's no surprise that the General Assembly kept its attention on this issue in 2026. Senate Bill 3222 repeals the existing Industrial Hemp Act and creates the new Illinois Hemp Act effective on November 12th, 2026. The changes, which we'll address shortly, generally were meant to align Illinois law and regulations on hemp products with the recent federal changes to hemp regulation. The new Illinois Hemp Act, in part, provides new regulatory definitions and requirements for various hemp-derived products based on THC and cannabinoid content. One definition that's new is final consumer hemp products are defined as naturally occurring hemp-derived cannabinoid products that are designed only for consumption or topical absorption and contain no more than 0.4 milligrams of THC per container. The Act further allows retailers to sell these products to consumers without legal authorization required for selling cannabis, for example, at either a licensed recreational adult use dispensary or licensed medical cannabis dispensary or some other hemp products. It further provides that these products, which are final consumer hemp products, may not be designed to be smoked or vaped and must only contain generally recognized as safe ingredients when it is sold as a food or beverage product. Any person found to have violated the Illinois Hemp Act once it goes into effect may be fined up to $500 for a single violation over 24 months or a greater amount for numerous violations within the same time frame. The Act further provides that local governments and other state agencies may enact additional legislation to enforce the provisions of the Illinois Hemp Act. Beyond incorporating these federal definitions, Senate Bill 3222 also seeks to bring hemp-derived products within the cannabis licensing, testing, distribution, and retail scheme, meaning that the sale, distribution, manufacture, and production of hemp products without state authorization or license will be prohibited. Many of the changes found in this bill, as I mentioned earlier, are meant to be conforming changes to align with this new standard and federal changes on this topic. And additionally, aside from these hemp-related updates, Senate Bill 3222 also introduces several changes to broader Illinois cannabis laws. For example, it doubles the threshold for minor cannabis offenses from 30 grams to 60 grams of any substance containing cannabis, as well as raising the legal possession limits for Illinois residents aged 21 or older to 60 grams of cannabis flower, 1,000 milligrams of THC in any cannabis-infused products, and 10 grams of cannabis concentrate. Additionally, the Act provides that a licensed adult use or medicinal cannabis dispensary may now operate until 2 a.m. rather than the existing cutoff of 10 p.m., subject to local zoning rules. And then moving forward, another bill that passed by the Illinois General Assembly this session was House Bill 4541, which amends the Uniform Unclaimed Property Act. The amendments made by this bill explicitly include overpayments to government entities in the definition of property under the Uniform Unclaimed Property Act. Now, this new definition of property may also include excess payments for taxes, licenses, or fees. This change is intended to clarify already existing state law, and under the Act, governmental entities must transfer the overpayment to the state, where the state treasurer will then hold the funds while actively trying to return them to the payor. Another bill passed by the Illinois General Assembly affecting locals of unit governments is House Bill 1353, which was passed on May 19th, and it amends the Volunteer Emergency Worker Job Protection Act. Under this bill's amendments, employment protections for volunteer emergency workers apply to volunteer emergency workers while they are participating in required training, as well as including a prohibition on terminating or penalizing these workers while participating in required trainings. This bill further provides that an employer may not require employees to take a vacation or other compensatory time in order to respond or participate in any emergency training sessions. The next bill we'll be talking about today is House Bill 2137, which was passed by the General Assembly on May 20th, and this bill amends the Governmental Account Audit Act, the County's Code, and the Illinois Municipal Code to require governmental bodies to post certain financial information on government websites if such a body maintains a publicly facing government website. Once the bill is signed by the governor, it will become effective, and as of the effective date, any governmental unit, county, or municipality which maintains a website must also post information on the website detailing where all audit or financial reports of the governmental unit, county, or municipal body are accessible to the public, as well as including a link to the Illinois Office of the Comptroller's websites. Greg, what are the next bills that our listeners should be aware of from the 2026 legislative session?
Sure, Tyler. A couple more Senate bills that passed. The first is Senate Bill 638, which passed on May 21st, and it amends the Illinois Municipal Code provisions on post-employment benefit trusts. Generally, if the money in the general fund of a municipality exceeds the municipality's operating expenses for the immediate preceding calendar year, so the year before, then the municipality may establish an OPEB trust or deposit monies into an existing OPEB trust. The trustee of the trust shall be the municipality, and the assets held in the trust shall be managed by the treasurer of the municipality in any manner, subject only to the prudent investor standard and requirements of applicable federal law. The limitations of any other statutes affecting the investment of municipal funds shall not apply to these trusts, so this is treated a little bit differently. And in addition, the trustee shall adopt an investment policy consistent with the standards that are contained in the Public Funds Investment Act. So that's Senate Bill 638. And then one more for you, Senate Bill 2102 passed also on May 21st. This bill amends the Illinois Property Tax Code provisions on filing of a taxing district's budget and appropriation ordinance and estimate of revenues. If a taxing district files its budget and appropriations ordinance and estimate of revenues electronically, then the county clerk's office receiving the filing must accept and acknowledge the filing by providing a receipt to the taxing district. We're seeing more and more of these appropriations and budget ordinances being filed electronically instead of using the mail, and this law seems to be just trying to acknowledge that practice.
Definitely a good one to have passed whenever the budget and all those type of ordinances are filed. Love to get a filing receipt. And then the next, we'll be switching gears here, and the next bills we'll be discussing are a series of House bills that affect how special districts of government in Illinois may dissolve or disconnect territory. House Bill 5166 was passed on May 21st, and it changes how certain special districts of government in Illinois may be dissolved. First, this bill amends the Illinois Drainage Code by allowing for the dissolution or dissolving of drainage districts in a county having more than 650,000 but fewer than 1 million inhabitants. Any drainage district in such a county may dissolve upon the affirmative majority vote of its own governing body and the affirmative majority vote of a receiving unit of local government. On or prior to the date of dissolution, all real and personal property and any other assets, together with all personnel, contractual obligations, and liabilities of the dissolving drainage district, shall be transferred to the receiving unit of local government. The receiving unit of local government must then submit a service continuation plan before the date of dissolution for the drainage district. Additionally, all rights and duties of the dissolving drainage district may be exercised by the receiving unit of local government on or after the date of dissolution. Then, within 30 days of dissolution, the dissolving drainage district must provide the Illinois Department of Revenue and the county in which property is located and in which taxes are levied or extended by or for the dissolving drainage district a certified copy of the ordinance or resolution adopted dissolving the drainage district and transferring the dissolving drainage district's rights, duties, and liabilities to the receiving unit of local government. And then in addition to drainage districts, this bill also amends the Sanitary District Act of 1936 to allow for the dissolving or dissolution of sanitary districts and also in counties having more than 650,000 but fewer than 1 million inhabitants under similar procedures. And this legislation is a kind of a continuing trend of an effort that we've seen play out over the last few years in Illinois, trying to help incentivize or encourage some consolidation of local government units within Illinois. The next bill we'll talk about is House Bill 5542, which was passed by the General Assembly on May 21st, and it amends the Illinois Park District Code provisions on petitions to disconnect park district territory. Under this bill, the governing board of trustees of any park district may adopt by ordinance and prior to a disconnection petition being submitted to the district, a determination to waive the full payment of any unpaid park district assessments outstanding at the time a petition to disconnect territory is submitted. This bill further provides that if a waiver is adopted by a park district, the county clerks shall certify the petition for disconnection without requiring the payment of any assessments which have been waived by the park district. And this bill was intended as an effort to help smooth or encourage and make it an easier process for park districts to disconnect territory if there's an interest in that. And moving on to the next group of bills, Greg's, what other bills should our listeners be aware of?
Sure, a few more from the Senate. Senate Bill 2769 was passed on May 21st, and it addresses how municipalities can use business districts' tax revenue. It specifically provides that a municipality, by a 2/3 vote of the corporate authorities, so the village board plus the village president or the trustees plus the mayor, may transfer money among business district tax allocation funds if the business districts are under the control of the municipality and the transferred money is used for the purposes of paying business district project costs as defined in statute. All of these transfers need to be documented and annually reported to the municipal corporate authorities, the village board, and such documentation must be publicly available. This is a similar concept to what we've seen with TIF districts, where if you have two TIF districts that are adjacent to one another, the municipality can transfer TIF funds from one district to the other district as long as the money is used for TIF eligible purposes. Same general concept here, except instead of TIF districts, we're talking about business districts tax allocation funds. So one to keep an eye on there. Senate Bill 2826 is the next one. This was also passed on May 21st, big day. And it amends eligibility for benefits under the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, IMRF, by providing that any participating employee in IMRF who has separated from the municipality, so no longer works for them, may elect to take a separation benefit in lieu of the retirement annuity, which is typically provided. Additionally, this bill provides that any individuals who earned service credits as IMRF employees may not serve as board trustees. So a couple of changes to retirement laws for public employees. And then the last one I have on my list for this section is Senate Bill 2836, also passed on May 21st. And it provides that beginning in the fiscal year 2027, any governmental unit that receives revenue of less than $1.4 million during any fiscal year must complete reports. This is a slight change. Currently, the law provides that if a municipality receives less than $850,000 for a fiscal year, that reports would be required. Now they're increasing it to 1.4 million. Similar changes were made to the township code by this law. Townships receiving revenue of more than $1.4 million for any fiscal year must have accounts and records audited by a CPA within 6 months after the close of their fiscal year. And townships receiving revenue of less than 1.4 million for any fiscal year must have and their accounts and records audited by an independent auditing committee of 3 township electors. So those are a couple new laws to keep an eye on.
Thanks for the update on those Senate bill, Gregs. And then there are also some more House bills affecting local governments from this session that our listeners should be aware of. House Bill 4292 was also passed on May 21st, so a really busy day for the General Assembly, and it amends the Illinois Fire Protection District Act. Under this bill, a fire protection district's board of trustees may adopt a resolution to transfer funds from the district's ambulance service fund if the district has not approved another transfer of ambulance funds under the provision in the same year. The monies remaining in the ambulance service fund after transfer are sufficient to pay for remaining obligations and costs payable from the fund in the current and subsequent fiscal years, so before and after, and that the transfer does not impair the fire protection district's finances or public safety mission. And then another bill here that kind of affects retirement benefits for public employees is House Bill 4909, which was passed by the General Assembly on May 27th, and it amends the IMRF, which is the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund article of the Illinois Pension Code. Now, this bill provides that a fund contributor is eligible to contribute to a Taft-Hartley pension plan to which the participating municipality or employer must contribute to at a rate greater than $5 per hour worked. Additionally, any person or public employee for whom a participating municipality contributed to both the IMRF fund and a Taft-Hartley pension plan at a rate equal to or less than $5 per hour worked from July 16th, 2014 is considered an employee under the IMRF article from July 16th, 2014 through the effective date of the bill. After the effective date of the bill, a person will only be both an employee under the IMRF article if the participating municipality pays an hourly contribution rate to a Taft-Hartley pension plan that is equal to or less than $5 per hour worked. House Bill 4375 is the next bill we'll talk about today, which was also passed by the General Assembly on May 21st. And this bill is effective immediately if signed by the governor, and it amends the Illinois School Code by extending the period in which school districts may transfer money allocated to specified funds. The board of any school district having a population of less than 500,000 inhabitants may make transfers from specified funds through June 30th of 2029. Now, these transfers may be made by providing that such a transfer is made solely for the purpose of meeting one-time, non-recurring expenses or any permanent interfund transfers authorized by any provision or judicial interpretations of the Illinois School Code. Another school bill we'll talk about today is House Bill 4397, which was passed by the General Assembly on May 20th, and it amends the Illinois School Code to provide additional qualifications for school psychologists. Under House Bill 4397, any school psychologist will be prohibited from providing psychological services outside of his or her employment to any student in the district or districts in which the school psychologist is employed. This bill also provides a list of services that school psychologists may provide, including providing assessments for students, administering universal screenings to students, and conducting student group counseling. However, it does prohibit a school psychologist from prescribing prescription medication, administering or monitoring pharmacological interventions. And if signed by Governor Pritzker, this legislation will take effect on July 1st, 2027. So it may require some changes for school psychologists and districts employing such personnel. House Bill 4788 was passed by the General Assembly on May 20th, and it requires all Illinois secondary schools to include training for students on how to properly perform CPR and use AED devices in accordance with standards adopted by either the American Red Cross, the American Heart Association, or any other nationally recognized certifying organization. Now, under this bill, no student is required to receive such training if a parent or legal guardian submits written objections to the secondary school, and no student may be disciplined with either suspension or expulsion if the school receives an objection from their student's parent or legal guardian. Additionally, beginning with the 2029-2030 school year, any secondary school providing CPR training must include the use of both breasted and non-breasted training mannequins and provide students with reasonable opportunities to practice on both types. And this is our school section here. So another school bill that we'll be talking about is House Bill 4862, which was passed on May 20th, and it will require the boards of Illinois school districts to develop and implement new staff mental health procedures. Beginning on January 1st, 2028, each school board must have adopted a staff mental health procedure or procedures that includes, at a minimum, a formal commitment to the school districts promoting employee mental health in the workplace, provide opportunities to school staff to provide feedback on employee mental health, include an annual communication to personnel, school personnel, included in the employee handbook, and provide a mechanism for the school board to receive information on mental health incentives and programs. Another school bill here is Senate Bill 2761, which passed on May 21st, and it amends the Illinois School Code to require that in-service training for school staff regarding students' health conditions must include training for staff on the proper procedure and method for handling service animals in school settings. Under the changes enacted by this bill, if signed, it provides that school personnel and staff must be given instruction on application of the Americans with Disabilities Act in school settings to include proper handling of any service animals that are given to students as a reasonable accommodation under the ADA, as well as training on the rights of students who use service animals and appropriate interactions between school personnel staff and a student's service animal. Now, Greg, to wrap up the legislative update portion of our episode today, are there any final bills that our local government listeners should be aware of?
Yeah, a couple more school bills right around the last day of school to boot too. So Senate Bill 2914 was passed on May 21st, and it addresses the removal or dismissal of contract teachers under the Illinois School Code. The new law it establishes expanded requirements for mandated written warning that must be provided to a teacher before a hearing on charges can be scheduled. The written warning needs to specify the nature of the alleged misconduct, and the school board, may assert that the conduct is part of an alleged pattern of behavior, but any subsequent disciplinary action must be reasonably related to the misconduct identified in the original warning. Before the boards vote to approve the warning, the teacher may ask for an opportunity to respond to the written warning, either in writing or in person. If the teacher disagrees with the board's final action, they can submit the warning to binding arbitration, and the arbitrator has authority to render a final binding decision on the written warning, with each party being responsible for paying half of the arbitrator's cost. So this act is effective immediately, so there's no delay on this upon being signed by the governor. And then the last bill I have, school-related bill, is 3361, Senate Bill 3361, which creates the Religious Hair and Facial Hair Protections Act, also known as the Jett Hawkins Law. This bill amends the Illinois School Code sections on registration and recognition of non-public and elementary and secondary schools by requiring these schools cannot prohibit religious hairstyles, hair-related religious practices, or religious-related facial hair. Non-public sectarian schools, so that's religious schools, are exempt from this bill's requirement. And this act also becomes effective immediately upon being signed by the governor, just like the prior bill I discussed.
Thanks for the update on those school bills as well as all the other legislation today, Greg. This was truly a busy spring legislative session from the General Assembly, and they really were working overtime, what looks like on May 21st. A lot of bills passed on that day. Now, as this is a regular meeting of the Quorum Forum podcast, we need to open the floor for public comment. Clerk John Smith writes, I work for a small village in Illinois, and we've been experiencing intermittent issues with a village employee over the past few months. The village trustees want to discuss this employee's performance issues at a board meeting, but I'm worried about how to list this item on the agenda without publicly embarrassing the employee. How detailed does the meeting agenda item for this discussion have to be while still complying with the Illinois Open Meeting Act? Thank you for submitting that question, John. Now, as always, we encourage municipal clerks and all local government bodies to make sure descriptions on meeting agenda items complies with the Illinois Open Meetings Act. And the Illinois Public Access Counselor, or PAC, recently published a binding opinion on this topic. In that case, a resident filed a request for review with the PAC, claiming that a village board violated the Open Meetings Act at a meeting when the board voted to terminate an employee based on the description provided for the item on the meeting agenda. Now, on the meeting agenda, this item was listed simply as personnel issues under the police and liquor portion of the board meeting. The resident's complaint to the PAC argued that the description of personnel issues failed to provide adequate advance notice of the general subject matter of the action being taken with regard to the termination of a municipal employee. In opinion number 26005, the PAC determined that the agenda description of personnel issues by the village board was too broad to have provided advance notice of the action item's general subject matter as required by the Open Meeting Act. In reaching this determination, the PAC read and referenced Section 2.02 of the Open Meeting Act, which provides that any agenda required under this section shall be set forth the general subject matter of any resolution or ordinance that will be the subject of final action at the meeting. Now, historically, the PAC has broadly interpreted this section to apply to any type of action that will be taken by a municipal legislative body at a public meeting. As such, the PAC noted that the agenda description in this case, which to remind our listeners was just personnel issues and the action taken was terminating an employee. And in reviewing that agenda description, the PAC determined that the notification or notice provided to the public by this agenda that did not give in reference or note that some action would be taken related to personnel issues, but it failed and did not specify to give the general subject matter, which was employee discipline or termination. Now, while a meeting agenda is not required to list the employee's name, if any final action will be taken regarding termination or discipline of a public employee at a meeting, then the agenda description or agenda item should list either discipline or termination in addition to the general description or heading of personnel issues. Moving forward, the next item on our meeting agenda today is the Department of Public Works. Greg, do you have any publications, speeches, or conference coming up, or are there any Ancel Glink conferences or presentations that our listeners should be aware of?
Yeah, we've got a few. I'm speaking at the Illinois Tax Increment Association a session on TIF for public officials on June 9th at 10 a.m. Should be a great session. We've got practitioners from upstate and downstate talking about TIF, how to set one up, issues to avoid, war stories, success stories, things like that. So that's on June 9th, the Illinois Tax Increment Association. I think there's registration information available on their website. And then we've got several additional exciting conferences and presentations coming up featuring other Ancel Glink attorneys that are worth keeping an eye out for. Ancel Glink associate Eugene Bolotnikov will be giving a Freedom of Information Act and Open Meetings Act 101 presentation for the Marshall County Association on June 10th, 2026. Katie Nagy, another Ancel Glink associate, and Jamie Wilkie with Lauterbach and Amon will be giving a webinar presentation on Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act rule on web content accessibility guidelines. That's on June 17th, and that's been a hot topic for a lot of our local government listeners as they are required to transition their websites into a more ADA compliant format coming up relatively soon. On August 13th, Ancel Glink associate Aaron Monforti will be presenting a Library Law 101 session at the 2026 Illinois Library Association Directors University. Should be a good talk. And my partner, Carrie Lynn Krafteffer, will be giving a municipal elections training to municipal clerks later on this summer. Date TBD on that one.
And another exciting conference opportunity for our listeners to catch Ancel Glink attorneys will be at the American Planning Association Illinois Chapter's 2026 State Conference later this year in the fall, where we will be presenting on a wide range of land use and planning issues. Well, dear listeners, that is everything on our meeting agenda for today, and a big thank you to Greg for joining us on this jam-packed episode. Greg, any final thoughts either on Bills or baseball season before we adjourn?
Go Tigers. Go Tigers.
As a Cubs fan, I agree. Go Tigers. Now, before we go, I want to remind everyone to subscribe and please leave us a review wherever podcasts are heard. As always, we prefer good reviews. Also, please email us your questions and show ideas to podcast@ancelglink.com and visit us online at quorumforum.ancelglink.com. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Seconded. All in favor? Ayes. And the ayes have it. See you next time on Ancel Glink's Quorum Forum podcast.